Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome along everyone. So last project I made this with the mum in the band there. 600 odd pieces. These pieces on here are 6.2mm. I've gone off and come up with some rough plans of what I want to do with this. I said I wanted to put it in some form of vase. I have done some very rough plans here. I don't know how well it shows on the camera there. Here will be the band that I've just made already, and just a gradual curve vase down the bottom there. So it will have a base of around about 50 to 60mm wide. I'm totally unsure about the top yet. I may well just carry on with the curve, or I may well do some form of a neck on there. So I'm not going to worry about that until I get that bit built up. Doing the plans this way, these squares all represent 2mm, and so I'll put this band on a scale, and at least that way I've got a scale here. Once you've got your wall thickness, you can then work out how thick you want all your pieces, and then you know how big to cut your pieces. So I've gone off here, got my measurements for all the pieces that I need to cut. Where this was 36 pieces per ring, for the rest of the vase now I'm going to do 18s. But I'm going to do this slightly different as well. Rather than put 18 pieces in with a 30% overlap like these have got, I'm going to do a 15% overlap. What that will mean is, the best way to picture that will be, imagine these two purple heart pieces on the bottom here. It will be like having one piece that is actually the size from the edge of this side of the purple heart to the edge of that side of the purple heart, and it will have the same gap there. Based on those measurements, what I've done, I've gone off and machined up some oak. I'm literally going to do all of this in oak, and I've machined up all these pieces. They're roughly just over 13mm by just about 16mm. So the 13mm will be the height of the pieces. At the same time, I've also cut these pieces of sapele off on the table saw as well. These are around about 1.5mm thick, and I'm really pleased the way those have come out. For these, I'm going to put these as the small inserts between the bigger blocks. So there'll be one row of this, and then there'll be one row of the oak. Now, the other problem I had when I made this was that these pieces were so small, they were flying off all around the shed, and when I had to clean up in here during the week, I was finding bits all over the places where I least expected to find them. So similarly to when I did this, what I'm going to do, I have still got my piece of tape on the hole there. I've put a piece of tape here in front of the blade so that hopefully it will reduce any pieces getting sucked down the front here. Some pieces will still get sucked down there, they just can't stop it. And with the pieces flying off, I will again put up pieces of plywood on the side of the saw here, a bit on the back and a bit on the front here, just to try and stop losing the pieces. For a base, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this piece of oak. Now I've cut and sanded up my first two rows of pieces, and I think, as you can see here, these are extremely fine, and I had a lot of trouble with these, the first few pieces I cut, in that they were literally just snapping up into pieces. So I've got a full row there. I've already got my indexing ring on because I don't want to take the chuck off, because I want to true this up so that it's level to start with, and then at least it's going to stay there, because I'm not going to have to take this off. So I'm just going to take this all the way back down now so that I've got a total level surface. Now, normally you wouldn't use a spindle like this for a base because of the end grain. So just like I've done before with the previous segmented work, I'm just going to chalk this all up and use my sanding board to make sure it's all totally level. And I'm not bothered about the outsides at the moment until I start getting all the pieces stuck on and then shaping it. And I'm just using my larger standing board here because it's just got better sandpaper on it. Now I've got a nice flat base there. Took a bit of doing because of the end grain, and I had a little bit of a bobble in the middle, but that's now nice and flat. My first distance on this has got to be 32.1 millimeters from the centre, and that's what I will put both lots of these pieces on, the thin ones, and then followed by the thicker oak ones. Now I'm going to have the same problems I did with the previous project, in that this gap is going to be smaller than the thickness of my board, so it means I'm going to have to manually put the last piece on. Now I've got my first 4 rows on, too thin and too thick. Before I sand off this top and flatten it off, I want to just start shaping the inside. And before I even do that, I've already set my stopper here for where the next row should go at. And I will just mark on here where the pieces are going to go. So that way it just gives me a guide for where I want to turn this inside to. And I'm just going to mark that all around, just as a very rough guide. So I can see I've just got to take a little bit off the inside here. To take the inside down here, I'm just going to use my Ashley Isles 9mm spindle gouge, and the reason I use that, as I've said before in previous videos, is I've got such an acute angle on here, in that I can have my handle at an angle like this, whereas with a lot of my other tools I'd be across there, so it does make life a lot easier going down. Now I'm just taking really light cuts here, don't want to be too vigorous with it, just try and true up all this inside. So that's the first 2 levels trued up on the inside. I will carry on now with sanding this top down flat again and then putting on the next rows. Now I've got the first 8 rows on here now, 4 large and 4 small pieces. I did turn down the first couple of rows inside first. I'm now going to turn down the next 2. I may well also start truing up the outside as well, just to give me more of an idea of shape. And I've also marked out where the next row of pieces is going to roughly be, so I haven't got to take too much out of here. I don't usually like using a scraper very much on open segmented work, because you have to really be careful that you don't go and try and take too much out, because otherwise if it digs in, the whole piece will literally fly to pieces. So I'm quite happy with the inside there now, and I'm just going to start to true up this outside a little bit, and for that I'm going to use my Ashley Isles 12mm spindle gouge. There's still quite a bit of thickness in there. I'm not going to go too much down into the bottom here. I want to try and keep that as thick as possible. So I'm going to carry on leveling up the surface now and carrying on building up. Now the really nice thing about when you do this open segmented work is that you get these lovely little shavings of mixture of the Oak and Sapele. Now this has been sat here about an hour while I went off to have my lunch. Got 2 more of these large rows on, so I'm just going to true this up inside and probably true up the outside as well. Then I will get 3, well I've got 6 more rows including the small flat pieces to put on, which I'll put those on then before I probably do any more work on truing it all up, and at that point I can then get it to fit the insert ring. Now that's the 18th row glued on, so we've got 9 large rows and 9 of these small pieces. Now you can obviously see that these last 2 rows of the smaller pieces I had to cut some fresh sapele, and this is now just probably around about 2.25 mil thick. It's certainly just over 2 mil thick, and these pieces in here are being taken down to about 1.5 mil. So I found it a lot easier to cut these into these segments with it being slightly wider and that little bit thicker, and it just means with the sanding board just spending probably another minute or two sanding it down to the required thickness. So that's come out a lot better. Now, this is the last row that's gone on here. I'm going to leave this overnight to dry properly, and that's really only because it's getting late now. So when I come out next, I will turn down this inside to true it all up, turn down the outside as well, and then look at gluing this insert ring on I made. And as you can see there, it's literally a perfect fit already. So I don't really want to touch the outside of this, because it will be a lot easier for me to glue this in place centrally. But what I've got to do is when I turn this inside down is try and get it so it's almost at this point here, because then at least that way I haven't got to do too much shaping inside. When I was using the scraper in there, if you've got the scraper fairly flat like you normally would, it can give quite a vicious cut in there and certainly dig into these gaps, which is when you'll get a catch and bits will come flying off. But what I find is just tipping over the scraper slightly, you're not getting such a vicious cut on there, so it just tends to ride the pieces a lot better, and it's just smooth that shape off in there nicely. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get all this inside sanded out. I'm going to try and make sure that I've got none of these fuzzies on the inside as well. This, however, is now at a size where that just about fits on. There's a slight lip on this, but that's ideal because at least I can centrally put that on there. Now I've sanded this up to 400 actually inside and out, even though the outside I might refine the shape a little bit more, but it was handy for getting rid of all the fuzzies. It's also the reason for having the light here, because with the light shining in, you can actually see inside these gaps perfectly to see where I've actually got to sand out any fuzzies. I actually just want to get a bit of spray lacquer inside the base here. The top has already been sanded and flattened off, so if I do get any of this on, I can just give this a gentle sand over the top to clean it up before I then glue this in place. So this only takes about 20 minutes to go off. I'm going to leave that for 20 minutes and then I'll just sand off this top and then glue on the next piece. And I've just sanded this top off again so it's clear of all the lacquer. I'm going to just give this a gentle coat of glue on here. Make sure I've got that sat in the right place, and then I'll just use my board here, which I'll bring up the tailstock, to just put some gentle pressure on there just to make sure it doesn't slip or anything. Now, that's the last of the open segmented rings to go on, and I've literally just made up this closed segment ring to go on the top here to cap it off. So I'm going to glue this exactly the same way as I've done really a lot of these other things, especially like when I put this on. Going to give this a coat of glue on here, a minimal amount again, so that I can put it on there, get it into position. It should hold still. I can spin the lathe by hand just to check that it's fairly true, and then I'll just bring up a weight on the tailstock just to give it a little bit of pressure. So this is now the finished shape, and I've got to say I am really pleased with how this has come out. So all I've got to do is sand the inside down to about here. So I'll sand that up to probably about 400 again. I will resand all the outside up to 400 again. Possibly I might even go for some 600 as well. I then need to make sure that I have got no little pieces in these gaps clinging on. Once it's all sanded up, I will give this at least 2 coats of the spray lacquer, then probably let it cure overnight. I will gently rub it back because it will pick up probably specks of dust, and the grain will raise a little bit because there's been nothing go on here. And then I will give it one more final coat. So I will come back when this is all finished. Now I've finished this off with 2 coats of spray lacquer, left it overnight to fully cure. I then came out last night, gently sanded it back with 600 grit paper so it was nice and smooth, and given it one more very light coat of spray lacquer, and it has come up a treat. If you'd watched the last project video, you'd have seen me make this centre band here with the mum and the little pattern on the back there. That's, I believe, contains about 612 pieces. For the actual main vase itself, there's about another 400 pieces in there. I believe in total there, if you include the base as well, there is 1,027 pieces of wood there. It's really hard for me to cut very thin strips like I've done with the Sapele, and I did manage to get those 3 long strips off that you see in the beginning of the video, which were about 1.5 mil thickness. But then when I ran out of those to do certainly the top half and a couple of 3 rows there, the only way I could cut them was probably around about 2.25 mil thick, which wasn't the problem. They were actually a lot deeper as well when they sat on here. And the good thing about that was that when I cut all the pieces on the table saw, they weren't breaking up or anything like that. So I had very little wastage on there. When I used my sanding board to level off the surface, it was a case of just sanding for probably about another minute to just take the thickness down from that 2 mil to round about just over 1 millimetre thickness. Size wise, this is 230 mil high, which is about 9 inches, and at its widest point for where this band is, it's around about 100 millimetres, might have come down slightly, and that is what, 4 inches. I've got to say I've really enjoyed doing this one, and I am super pleased with the result. I was totally unsure what to do above the centre band. I knew precisely the shape here that I wanted for the bottom half. So once I've got the centre band on, I could then decide what to do with the top. Making that closed segment ring was really quick. So it was literally a couple of hours to make that closed segmented ring, and then it could be glued straight on the piece and turned down. Now the other thing I really found as well when I did this, once I'd got this central band on, when I was working on the top pieces, I was then starting to pick up a lot more vibration. You didn't really notice it so much when you was turning, just shaping the piece. But when it really became evident was when I was flattening the piece. And I don't know whether you actually see in the video, but I was literally holding the vase with one hand while it was spinning on the lathe, and holding the sanding board on the end as well, and that absolutely worked fine just to take out all the vibration. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you on the next project video.